and apparently he was very gifted.
Okay. Yep.
It wasn't
Gotcha.
me. I'll say that for Mike Falaise. That was not me. But there was a code she gave to the other nurses, like, "Hey, come up here. You got to see this thing." Yeah.
So it wasn't really like a good-looking guy. It was just.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Yes. So I find a lot of joy, and like I would even call it a high, in connecting with people and being a resource for them as like confidant. And not necessarily like maybe a healthy thing, but
You were one of those people.
I
know these
said
people.
that to me on the phone. Yeah, one of those people you
You
mentioned.
are one of those people because they're I've seen people like this. They don't try to do it. They're just those type of people where people will confide in them. People will open up to them. And that's how you know that's kind of what you're born to do.
Yeah. I mean, a girlfriend of mine, I just met up with her, and she brought up this term, which I'm going to have to Google. It's called a wise baby. Have you heard that before?
I have.
The wise baby. And I said, it's funny you say that word, specifically wise, because my first memory of feeling this way, where I'm like, oh, I love this, was I was in 6th grade, and I went to parochial school, pre-K all the way through 12. And there was this 6th grade teacher who everybody was terrified of. They were so scared of her. And I mean, she motivated me to actually like work, because I didn't really care about my grades until 6th grade. So there was something about her. But my father would be the one to drop me off. And it had to be so early before anybody was there. So I would just be sitting outside in the hallway waiting for her. She'd let me in. And I was there with her for probably a good 20 minutes or so before anybody else came. And so during that school year, she started to confide in me, probably inappropriately.
Wow. Did you say this was a nun?
She was not a nun.
Okay.
She might have been like one at one point in her life, but I'm not sure. She was probably of retirement age at that point, and I was like 12 years old then. She would talk about the other students. It would be a lot of things. And I don't even remember what I said to her. But at the end of the year, she did class superlatives for everybody. And I got wisest. And I was like, I know why I got this, even though nobody else knew.
Well, you're the keeper of her secrets.
So when my friend Allison told me about the wise baby, I was like, that's funny, because that's exactly what she like provided to me, and I like ate it up. And there have been other, adults and friends growing up, it became more appropriate. But that was something that it was just like, it's so memorable to me that somebody was able to confide in me, even though I was 12 years old. She saw that in me.
I believe that there are certain people in this world that have some sort of sage-like aura. Maybe
or
it's the right
old
word.
soul, people say.
Old soul. That's a big one, right? Oh, they're an old soul. Well, most of the
Mm-hmm.
people who call themselves old souls are not old souls. They just like that term. But there are people, and if you look throughout your life, you'll be able to pick out the people who are those old souls who have that sage personality. And you either have it or you don't. And if you don't have it, that's fine. But some people are just born with it. And I always, usually I guard against, hey, you're born a certain way. You can work to be the best at whatever you want to be as your abilities allow you.
Exactly.
But with something like that, I think it's in there. It's just in there. So you finish, you go in. I'm trying to, like, it's a chicken or egg type of thing. Where you became a nurse, then you became a therapist. Did you even work as a nurse?
Mm-hmm.
You did. And you just well,
I just left the hospital now. I have worked as a nurse this entire time also. I have done both.
You have 2 jobs.
Simultaneously. Up until January. Yeah.
You're either very bored or very hyperactive.
Motivated.
Holy cow. That's not like, I load trucks at night. I'm a cop and I load trucks at night. That's like 2 major professions, and you got it. Why? I need to know, like, why this dual life?
Well, it started because I was originally a nurse working to support myself in graduate school. and then moved back to Utica and started a family. And after having my first child, I was like, okay, I'm going to find a place where I can be hired and just start working to see clients part-time. And then right before COVID, I decided to take the plunge and just have my own practice. So I did that part-time. This whole time I was working, I worked for the New York State Psychiatric Institute in New York City. So I worked, it was still psychiatric, it was still mental health. I don't know if you've ever heard of this hospital. So it's affiliated with Columbia Presbyterian. Well, actually Dr. Miglietta worked, by the way, at Columbia. It's attached to that facility, but it's also a hospital in and of itself. It's state-run and it's research hospital. So I worked on a small unit with patients suffering from depression and eating disorders. And then from there, I worked at a family medicine center, which housed our residency program, so resident physicians, a high refugee population, never a dull day. You saw all sorts of medical issues. I was the nurse manager there, then went to the hospital, worked as a nurse in quality and then infection prevention during COVID. And then January, I went full-time private practice. I left the hospital officially. And what I held on to the most really, it was hard just to leave like one behind. It's hard just to say goodbye to one thing. And also the benefits, I'm just going to say it.
So
like,
you're getting into that stage of life where your career is your career. And most people are okay with that, where you aspire to be something else. Did you feel lost? So when you start a new career that late in your life, it almost feels like you have to learn to walk backwards. And you can do it. Like you can eke your way through it. It's going to take you a minute to get your rhythm. Was that the type of feeling that you had?
Maybe with the actual business part, because I feel like I've been in graduate school. I was in my 20s. So it's been this dual career for such a long time, almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the business piece feels unanchoring for sure.
I think
that's how I describe it. It's weird. It's almost like I think this is how it would feel if I was retiring or something, because I'm making my own schedule. I don't have the security blanket of like this constant paycheck or.
Well, it's also more motivating because the highest contributor to any failure is having a plan B. And when you're in your own practice, there is no plan B. There's no safety net. You're out there on your own. It's either you make it or you break it. Mm-hmm. That's it. So in a lot of ways, that kind of forces success. So you get into this therapy world, and this is why we wanted to bring you in here. Because everybody needs a little marriage counseling. Everybody needs a little marriage therapy. I've been to it plenty of times.
I know somebody.
You know somebody?
Going through that. I know.
Oh boy.
My wife will tell you. My wife will tell you I don't get enough of it, and I probably need more. It's a tough thing because you got two people coming in, who love each other but hate each other at the same time. Otherwise, if they totally hated each other, you're out of business. Then divorce is inevitable. So how did you get into marriage counseling?
I wanted to be a sex therapist.
That's the worst. Then you got to hear people's gross details.
Which really, in and of itself, like sex therapy becomes relationship couples therapy. Because a lot of the times it's not, you're always taught you need to rule out a physical thing that's going on, but quite often that's not really the issue. The issue is something's going on emotionally or relationally with the couple or independent of like the physical body.
So you were prepared to hear the intimate details of couples' lives. Mm-hmm. How do you prepare your head for that? Because there's certain things you don't want to know.
I'm comfortable with a lot of things.
Really?
Hearing a lot of things. Yeah.
The husband wants to
put up, you have to remember, I grew up in a family that talked about all sorts of medical issues at the dinner table. So I have to watch myself sometimes because a lot of things don't bother me, at least in that respect. They don't bother me.
I want to digress for one moment. When
Okay.
when you were a nurse, I know you're not a nurse. You're still a nurse, but you're not.
I'm not actively at the bedside.
Correct.
Yeah.
I want to know what your code was to the other nurses when a cute guy came in or something like that. From what I understand, when there was something that you wanted everybody to see,
I don't remember that.
there was
we
there's
had
a
a lot of
code.
geriatric patients.
Hey,
We had a lot of very
like-
elderly
code?
men.
Hey, there's a red balloon on 3. You
I
know.
don't recall. Don't remember.
This is like a steel sign and baseball sign.
It is, and I heard that from nurses. That's why I know that. I've heard that from nurses.
On inpatient units,
Well,
it must have been doctors that they were referencing, probably.
no,
right?
no. So the one in particular that
I never heard this, so
the one in
I'm not-
particular
Okay.
that I'll.
All right.
So they had a guy coming in there, and for whatever reason, he had something going on where he had no clothes on, and apparently he was very gifted.
Okay. Yep.
It wasn't
Gotcha.
me. I'll say that for Mike Falaise. That was not me. But there was a code she gave to the other nurses, like, "Hey, come up here. You got to see this thing." Yeah.
So it wasn't really like a good-looking guy. It was just
I was
in
trying
reference
to. I was
to
trying to
an
clean.
appendage.
I was trying to clean it up. I still have some chivalry left in me.
I mean, I don't remember that either. I don't remember a code.
Oh, you would just go down and say
straight
it.
up.
I
Just
mean,
say
it would. I can't recall. So I feel like I'm on trial on a stand. I don't remember.
So, Miss
Your
Chabot,
Honor.
Comment.
when you were on floor 3, tell me what you saw. No, but it's in every profession. So that's not uncommon. You know, if in the police world, if there was something that you wanted people to see, you said, "Hey," or let's say you had to go to the bathroom. "Hey, I got to come in for a 10-100." It means I got to pee.
Yeah.
I got to pee. So there was always codes or
Yeah.
little
Code Brown. I mean, that's a common one.
code 10-200. It was 10-200.
Code Brown was bad.
Or you see a cop coming in ripping off their keepers. So you wanted to be a sex therapist, and you were prepared to hear all that stuff. But how did it morph into marriage counseling, or did they sort of go hand in hand?
They go in hand. So I looked for a degree, like different programs in marriage and family therapy, because that seemed to be the profession that had the most education and direction in that realm. Like social work doesn't really focus.
Well, I think if you went with
Focus
sex
on-
therapy, you would have pigeonholed yourself.
Yeah, and there's certification in sex therapy, and there might be some programs in that, but that's not as common.
Because with marriage counseling, you're going to get
Because
that too.
if you're going for sex therapy, you're going to be doing marriage therapy.
So you get your license to be a marriage counselor, a marriage therapist. And by the way, counselor, therapist, like what's
So they're all they're similar in the way that they're all under like the bracket of like mental health, right? And so if you're a social worker, you learn some therapeutic skills, and then quite often if you want to specialize in trauma or couples work or children, you're going to go on for further certifications and trainings. Same thing with mental health counseling. With a marriage and family therapy degree and license, it's a lot of the classes and courses and trainings is under the umbrella of systemic, like we look at everything through the systemic lens, the systems of a family. So we can see individuals, we can see children, we can see couples, we can see any sort of combo. So I see individuals and I see couples. Sometimes I'll see dyads, like two people of the same family, so like an adult child and their parent or something like that. But typically I will see romantic couples and individuals. But I feel like I'm always doing couples work or some sort of systemic work, even if there's just one person in front of me.
right, because nobody's alone in this world. You know, everybody's got somebody attached to them, either taking care of them or they're taking care of somebody else. And there's always problems. You sit close enough to somebody for a long time, there's going to be an issue. Mike and I will have to start attending couples therapy soon. Soon.
Never worked. For
So, what did you get a little bit of trial by fire? You get your first couple in there, you get and they just start unloading on you. How does that? And you're sitting there, they're coming to you for help. And one thing I do know about therapists is you may have the tools, you have a toolbox, but you don't
Yeah.
know everything.
No, and you can't just it's you go and you get certified for something or even do a training, and it's great on paper, or it's great when you watch like these famous therapists show you a video of this couple and it's just so like idealistic. And that is not how a typical couple session goes. And a lot of times couples wait. They wait and they wait and they wait until they're in crisis. And things are so eruptive. It is really hard. You have to be much more energetic and interject a lot more in a couple session like that than if you just have one person in front of you.
I believe it was one of your Instagram posts.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was one of yours where you said if your wife tells you to go to marriage counseling,
Yeah.
it's time. It's time to go to marriage counseling.
Yeah.
Because there's something wrong, obviously.
Yes. That was me.
I'm almost positive it was. I wasn't sure though.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit, because that was something that stuck with me.
Yeah. And this happens a lot with couples where one person might perceive the relationship as there's more problems than the other person. If you ask both people to rate the marriage and their commitment to the marriage and whatever it is, their happiness, commitment, there are going to be different ratings. And not always, but more often than not, the woman rates it much lower than the man. So if the woman is saying something that there might be a problem and I'm thinking that we should go to therapy, it's usually not just like a passing thought. There's usually something up. And actually, going to couples therapy when there are just like little blips and things that you can work on is much more beneficial. It is an absolute pleasure to have a couple come in at the right time because they both usually want to work and you see much, much more progress.
So what are you going to get the most benefit out of if you're overweight and you're having heart problems? Should you start losing weight before the heart gives out or after you have a heart attack?
Right.
So it's kind of the same thing. I understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
So couple comes into your office. I'm gaining a lot of information here when I go to marriage counseling.
Yeah, I'm interested in your experiences. I'm very curious.
couch.
Holding back on my
2,
curiosity.
3 more shows.
So the couple comes in and you have a couch and you have
Love seat.
You have of
course.
That's cute. And then you can, I'm sure you've done this because my wife and I have done this. The couple will sit apart from each other. So if it's a 3-person chair, and I know it's purposely, there's a 3-person sofa in there, there's nothing, like they won't sit next to each other. They'll sit on opposite sides because they're in crisis or they're in battle mode. And you notice that stuff, correct?
How people position themselves, absolutely.
Yeah. You read body
Yeah.
language. I imagine
I
you get
do.
really good at it.
I do.
So
Yeah.
when you see that, tell me what goes on in your mind when you see a couple that's sitting on opposite sides of the seat.
I feel like I see it more often than not.
Do you think you can bring them back together when you first see it? Is that your thought process?
I think it's multifactorial. So I'm taking in their body language. Sometimes they can sit far apart, but if somebody gets emotional or starts talking about something and they're upset, I look for the other person to reach out to them or see how they react to them. When I first see a couple, the very first session is a history. I take the history of their relationship. And so one of the questions is, tell me about how you met, what attracted you to one another. I hear from both of them. And what's really interesting is how the other person might receive the other person's experience. Sometimes they might downplay it or they might spin it in a more negative way. Their memory is not as positive as the other person's.
So I've come across this, that same question, and unfortunately, I'll let a little bit of dirty laundry out here. My wife will always end it, but as soon as the but happens, my ears shut down, and I totally forget what was said. It's like say 5 things.
So maybe positive first and then the but.
Positive in the but.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like saying, I was wrong, but. Well, don't tell me you were wrong. Don't apologize if you're going to use the word but. Just apologize. That's the way that I am. And then you have to overcome this stuff. Is there a point where you see this ain't going to work? Where you just sort of throw your hands up and say, you two don't need to be together? Or is there always hope?
Okay. So I try to give people some time. There are some areas where I will, quote unquote, break up with a couple, and that's rare.
You
Yeah.
say we're done.
Sometimes I have to do that. Yeah, where I feel like it's a waste of everybody's time. And I feel like I'm doing them a disservice to just have them keep return to therapy when I'll give you a couple scenarios. One is if one or both of them are actively drinking to excess where it's a problem. And there's a lot of reactivity. There might not be like actual physical abuse, but it might be verbal or just throwing things. And, foundationally, I know we started talking about grounding. The biggest thing in conflict is to be able to identify when you are starting to get ramped up in fight or flight. I'm a Gottman trained therapist, so they use the term flooding, but being able to identify that and like calming yourself down. If you are actively abusing alcohol, you're not really going to be able to do that. That's going to be a huge barrier, especially if there's abuse going on or reactivity. And so if somebody's not willing to work on themselves first, that's just an example of it,
How can you?
then they're not really going to be making progress in couples therapy. So, and sometimes it's more obvious than not. Sometimes it's not for me to decide if it's a problem, but if it's a problem for one or both of them and they've spoken to me about it, that's enough for me to say this is, I've had people have legal problems or there's been physical abuse with bruises and things like that. So it's pretty obvious that needs to be taken care of first. Like individual work needs to be taken care of first. And then you can come back.
You're under an obligation if you see some sort of sign. I always said this with domestic disputes. If I walk into a domestic situation and the wife or the husband is screaming, I want a TRO. It's the ones who don't ask for it. That's the ones that I'm scared of. So if a woman's there with her husband in marriage counseling and she's not saying anything, but you see the physical signs, it kind of probably raises red flags for you. Yeah. And then now you're under some sort of obligation, correct?
If it's an adult and they refuse to file charges, is that what you mean?
No, just you have to report it, or you see bruises, you see a black eye or something. Oh, I fell down the stairs type of situation. Which my wife has fallen down the stairs, and I swear to God, she fell.
Yeah.
I fell. Yeah, she fell. She fell. She fell. Wasn't me.
So, I mean, that's an extreme example, right? But it's something that points to the individual work that sometimes needs to be done. Sometimes there's trauma work that somebody really hasn't done on themselves that's getting in the way. Not in a way where there's like abuse going on in the relationship, but they're not able to really show up in a way that they can work on how they communicate with one another. So they need to do their own work on themselves first.
Because you're actively trying to work yourself out of a job with couples. If you're trying to bring their relationship together, in which case they won't need to see you. It's a weird dynamic if you think about it with therapists. So if a therapist is ethical, you're trying to help that person so someday they can leave you. You're not creating that ever-present situation, which is kind of crazy.
We're not going to be running on a hamster wheel forever.
Right.
Like that's not why you're paying me.
But
right?
you said you had to break up with couples from time to time.